Hello and welcome to the second in a series of podcasts looking at radio production. All of these podcasts are directly linked to the university's curriculum and should be used to support, not replace, the teaching in the classroom. In today's podcast, I'll be looking at finding the right guest or contributor for your programme. I will again be joined by Costing the Earth producer Martin Poyntz-Roberts, who tells me how he and his team find the right person or the right people for his programme.
When we try and find our contributors, when we try and find who we're going to speak to in the programme, we do an awful lot of research. So I will often immerse myself in reading about a subject that I know very little about for several days. Once I've got sufficient knowledge to have a conversation with the scientist, which is quite a tough challenge sometimes, because scientists can sometimes be a little bit spiky if you don't know exactly what they're talking about. Once you've done that research, you make a phone call and you try and find out more about the subject. You try and find out if the person you want to speak to can actually talk on radio, can actually tell a story. So it's all very well finding a scientist who's got brilliant theories, who might well be changing the world when it came to nuclear fusion. You can't tell you it. You've got a little bit of a problem, haven't you? So it's really delving deeply into a subject, finding out as much as you possibly can, finding out who the key players are, and then speaking to them, making notes, deciding where those people will fit in a program. If you're putting together a documentary, how they link together. So it's a fairly long, laborious process. It's good if you like talking to people, though. The thing I would say about it as well is that at the end of the day, no matter who my audience is, obviously you bear in mind your editor, you do bear in mind the audience. I ultimately make programs that I want to listen to. I make programs for myself, and if I am making shows that at the end of it I think I've made a good job of that and I would listen to that myself, I'm happy.
However, unlike Martin, you don't always have the luxury of researching and speaking to your contributor before recording begins. Let me give you an example. When I produced Gathering by the Ganges, my researcher had organised 1 or 2 interviews before we arrived at the event. And that was it. We had 59 minutes to fill. And those pre-arranged interviews would be worth 5 or maybe 10 minutes. What did we do? We went and talked to people. But not just anyone. We had an audience, a Radio 4 audience to satisfy. And because we were already planning to use voiceovers for our Indian contributors, we had to make sure we found someone who was not only relevant, but also someone who had an interesting story to tell.
I felt that in that I was still mourning my father's death, that I wanted to continue a formal ritualization of his passing. So no place other than India affords one more of a soulful expression of memorializing. To me, ritual has to do with invoking memories. So on that day that I performed this puja, the memories of my dad were just very, very lucid to me.
Why did we use her? Firstly, she was very easy to understand. And secondly, and more importantly, she had a story to tell that was not only relevant, but moving too. And if you're wondering how we found her, through speaking to many, many, many people. Having listened to finding contributors for your programme, I would like to play you an interview which, in my humble opinion, is not one of the greatest. You may disagree, of course.
I don't know anything about it on its Tunbridge Wells.
But you've lived here, I believe, since you were 18.
That's right.
What's the nicest thing about Tunbridge Wells?
What?
What's the nicest thing about Tunbridge Wells?
I don't know.
Don't you know anything nice about it?
No.
Nothing at all?
No, I know nothing about Tunbridge Wells.
But it must be a healthy place. It must be a healthy place.
Oh, it's a healthy place because you go back to the 15th and 16th century, can't you?
Yes. And
Perhaps you don't know that.
Oh, yes, I knew that. But anyway, it must be healthy for you to be looking so wonderful at this age.
Well, why shouldn't I look wonderful?
Well, that, of course, comes from the inner spirit, I know. That comes from the inner spirit. From your own spirit.
Yes, it is. I don't know what you want me to say. If I can say anything to please you, I will, but
What you're saying delights me. What you're saying delights me. I want you to tell me something about living in Tunbridge Wells.
Well, I can't tell you. I lived in Tunbridge Wells. That's all I know about it.
Have you ever taken the waters here?
Yes, lots.
What do you think about the waters?
Water, well, I don't think much of it.
Do you think?
Tunbridge Wells water, you drink a lot of it, what I mean to say, you'd soon be iron, wouldn't you, if you keep drinking it?
But don't you think it has a good effect on people?
Pardon?
Don't you think it has a good effect on people?
No, I don't.
That's an early end of this podcast, but before I go, I will leave with Martin's 3 top tips for finding not only a great story, but the people to go with it too.
My 3 top tips for making a good radio program, finding a good radio story, would be always be looking at different ways you can tell a familiar story. So you might have heard a story that you think, oh, we've heard that story before, but there is usually a different way of telling it, and it's trying to find, on radio in particular, trying to find novel ways